I'm Sallie Shishmanian, and I want to welcome you to Collector's Favorites today. And as you can see, we're going to be talking about magazines. So I'm going to introduce the magazine guy, Bill Doggett. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Sallie. How are you?
Well, I'm glad you could finally come. Bill and I have been talking at the shows and exhibits for years. And Bill carries a wide range of magazines. And how did you get started on this?
That's an interesting story, Sallie. I have a long history from when I was a child of having to do Saturday afternoon chores where I would go through the family's magazines and newspapers and determine, I was charged to throw them out, but for some interesting kind of a priori reason I decided that I would go through them and actually determine which ones could be tossed and which ones really should be saved. So it starts from when I was 6, 7, and 8.
Well, I think most people that are serious collectors, you know, it does start at that age. And it started as a hobby, and now you've turned it into a business, but of course you still collect magazines.
Absolutely.
So, and what I love is now you also do, for instance, the Modern Times or the Modernism show. I love to see that show, but I don't really collect that era. But I'm always so glad to see you there because I can always find a magazine. And you have provided me with hours of entertainment because there's nothing more fun to me, or most people, than looking through an old magazine. Because it gives such a picture of an era, or if you're interested in something specific, you might find something to do with that. So anyway, we want to start off with like your really, really vintage, and this is from December 1888, so over 100 years old and in beautiful condition, by the way. So what can you tell us about that?
This is the St. Nicholas publication. It's a digest publication that was busy, active, and very popular in the 1870s through the very early 1900s. This particular, or these two particular issues, are Christmas issues. These are considered very, very collectible issues because the illustration, of course, is of a vintage Santa Claus and reindeer and all that, but it's something that people also, I should say businesses also paid a great deal of attention to because of the fact that they could reach people through advertising for Christmas-related product in the back. So it's a neat item that has cross-collectible, it's stories, it's seasonal, but it's also
and Christmas
business.
Collectors, of course.
And the Christmas collectors just glom on to the St. Nicholas.
You know, I was thinking, because I have some of Peterson's Ladies magazine from the 1860s, and there really were not ads per se.
That's right.
And they only sold them, I guess they made their income by selling the actual magazine. And those things were on wonderful rag paper, and they look brand new, and it looks like these are in pretty good paper, huh?
They survived very well.
Yeah. Now we wanted to show from this Harper's Monthly from 1901, so again that's
From
over 100 years old.
From November.
Yeah, and we're actually, this will air a little bit later, but we're in November of 2003 right now. Now here's a beautiful ad, and from what I know, this is unusual that it would be color this early.
Absolutely true. Very unusual. And in this era, Harper and in Cosmopolitan magazine, you do see these occasional, I think they're called stone litho color plates.
It's the same way they did, I think, Orange Crate labels. And I just wanted to point out, here is the Nabisco symbol.
It's a spectacular painted ad that one could really, and it not only got one's attention because it stands out, it's a thicker paper, but also it's something that one could later frame in one's home. And I think that was part of the design of doing such an ad.
We're getting a nice close-up of that Nabisco, so that's just great. So, and I want to mention too that people who collect certain objects, you can often find them in these magazines. So, for instance, if you're a pen collector, you might find an advertisement in a 1936 magazine for your pen, and it's always fun to do that. So, it's always very exciting. Now, you said that these have different categories, so these are what, Christmas vintage? Christmas vintage, and what would these be, for instance?
These are simply your everyday digest, your kind of pre-life, pre-time magazines. There were a number of them that were active between, let's say, 1890 through the 20s. There's Harper's, there's Cosmopolitan, there's Century. and a number of others.
Let's just see
outdoor.
what's, and so they're literary, but I suppose
Literary.
there are articles about, now here's one, something glimpses of the Southwest. The Southwest collector would be real interested in that.
Fantastic Southwest articles throughout many of these. There is another magazine from the same era which is wonderful. Sunset magazines, in particular, are very, very rich in advertising for different parts of the state, showing the state at times where literally it was nothing but cornfields or simply barren. And those are very, very, very desirable and collected.
Oh, because they're history too. Now this is an interesting one. This is from 1890?
December.
Yeah. So, and what is this category here? What is that?
Outing. For people that were into
sports and
more outing
hiking,
and travel, actually travel.
Very interesting.
Very early travel, and you'll find in some of these magazines of this vintage simply spectacular early car ads.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the earliest possible, get out and get under,
that look more like a wagon.
Yes, absolutely fantastic.
Well, I love to look through old magazines. Now we're going to go a little bit later.
Right.
And for instance, and we just have these spread out kind of according, and this is in beautiful shape, by the way. Now what is this one?
This is American Boy. It's American Boy from the early 30s. What's notable about American Boy at this era is that they basically combine forces with what's called the Youth Companion, and which was an earlier magazine, a large format magazine, mostly black and white with illustrated stories. This has also illustrated stories, but has a far more amount of advertising throughout, focused on the demographic of young boys basically 9 to 15.
And a really lovely illustration, and it still has the mailing label of somebody in Altadena.
Yes, absolutely.
Some young man.
Many years ago.
Yeah. He's not so young anymore. And here's just an example of, I guess that's a story with a wonderful black and white illustration. So great art in these things. And most of it was drawn or painted. It wasn't photographic at that point.
Exactly.
All right, now let's just go on to another, here would be Specialty, and that's a railroad magazine. Now who would that appeal to?
Railroad collectors. Railroad collectors.
But who was it published for? Yeah, I know.
Specifically for railroad collectors. The railroad.
Even then.
This is Railroad magazine from September 1939. This is specifically a digest, just as you would see on the newsstands today, geared towards certain markets. This is geared towards the railroad market.
But people who traveled by. Oh, and isn't that the World's Fair? There's the World's Fair. So a World's Fair collector
would love
that as well. So was this geared to people who travel, you mean, or just railroad buffs?
Railroad buffs, specifically. The design of the cover to include the perisphere of the World's Fair is also going to focus them on using the train to get there. So it makes it's very suggestive.
And here's just like a wonder story. So these are like stories for young people?
Very collectible. Actually, not just young people. They were designed, these are basically what's called pulp magazines, but they're science fiction pulp magazines. These are the earliest examples, specifically wonder stories. Wonderful use of illustration, fantasy, science fiction fantasy. Some of the earliest possible what would I say?
Let me show the paper.
Please,
Go ahead.
Absolutely. The paper has survived, fortunately.
But it is pulp, and you can tell by the yellowish. And these were certainly not meant to survive, which is why they're more rare
and in that
and more collectible. This is beautiful.
It's very, very hard to find.
Just almost perfect.
Yeah, geared towards the demographic of young men through young adults.
And these were real kind of hokey ads.
Right.
Not too sophisticated, but still around, Goodyear tires. And that's another interesting thing when you look through these is, I remember looking at Life magazines during the 40s, and of course I buy them now and look at them again. Sometimes I remember the images, something strikes me, oh, I remember that. But what's interesting is how many products are still around, and yet how many products are completely gone, and you thought, oh, when did they stop making that, or when did that leave us?
That's
all right.
Absolutely true.
Now we're going to go on to another category, and this is, I guess, is sports.
Sports, baseball specifically. These are two very, very collectible baseball magazines. One, of course, on the bottom is of the gentleman Ted Williams.
This is 38.
This is 1938. This is one of the most collected Ted Williams magazines. It's in very good shape, and when he died, you could not buy this magazine. fast enough. It was just amazing to see the interest in that.
This is in great shape.
They both are, and they're both very visual, and they're
Yeah.
wonderful as not only as a collector's item, but as a cross collectible in the sense of people that are interested in baseball would also be interested in the times that this particular issue was about, and so it becomes beyond just a collectible. It becomes, oh, my gosh, you know, you have the Ted Williams life. I've been wanting to have that, or look at that. Can I look at that? And that person may get another one with the intention of a gift to the person so interested. And so that's yet another kind of life that these magazines have.
And I always urge young collectors, you know, who may not have a lot of money to spend, I mean, to get, again, the idea of the time and place.
Exactly.
And something you're interested in. And they're relatively, you know, they're collectible. They're around and you can find them. And I just think they're, you know, the best to give you a real sense of how people... Do you have many Hollywood people or people like that, stage designers or set decorators?
Absolutely.
They must, and fashion, you know.
That come through and inquire and have special search requests?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to say that I've been able to service them in a very good way over the years.
Yeah, it's you know, to get the look of an era, there's no better way, like Life magazine, which just encompassed all kinds of subjects. That was a general, you would say, general category.
In fact, on this particular note, I've been very fortunate to come across, not just set designers, but people that are involved in films where it is a period.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
And have absolutely been just, you know, they've been in love with me because of the fact that I can provide them with quality product, not just a Life magazine that's, you know, oh yeah, we can get a couple
time and date.
You know, time and date.
1941.
The condition is wonderful, you know, and I've been very honored, you know, by the fact that being in Hollywood, we have that as a
you see a lot of people at any of the shows, the vintage clothing shows that are, you know, that do fashions for the movies or whatever, and so it's kind of interesting to know that that's where your things go.
Absolutely.
Here's another American boy. We've already done then, but just another wonderful illustration. All right, now let's go on a little bit because this is something that brings back memories to me personally, and this red one is a Flair. And that was a magazine, and my parents actually subscribed to this, and it was very high-end, very sophisticated.
Very sophisticated.
And
beautifully printed.
Which I guess my parents were. Anyway, let me just open this because the magazine did all sort of special things. Now this is, did they compile the magazines or just special? Yeah, okay.
Hand-done magazine.
Yeah.
Amazing that they were able to produce these die-cut cutouts, tissues, all kinds of things.
They did all these things. So this was actually in an issue of the magazine. So here's a little, you know, I mean, all of that work to put these in specially. They did, every issue had something interesting like that. It was wonderful. And
this one folds out. And
look at this. And I have to say, I was telling Bill that this sort of formed my taste in lots of ways. I mean, I actually remember this. And, you know, you wouldn't have seen much use of Victorian things at that time. And then it had a separate little booklet. I mean, just fabulous.
Very fabulous and very, very collectible.
Were these very expensive at the time?
Expensive.
They must have been.
Expensive.
Yeah. My dad was a publisher, I guess, so maybe that's why he was interested.
Demographic was the higher end.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Then I had not thought of this, but I'm pretty sure my dad got this as well. And this was Gentry, and it was a very fancy man's magazine. And tell us about this. Gentry
was a short-term, or I would say short-run magazine from the 50s. Demographic was really rather exclusive. It was for the upscale male who was usually a business executive or the traveler, the retired traveler. Clothing lines, the best clothing boutique lines, as well as swatches of clothing.
Yeah, let's take a look at this.
Stories that include all kinds of little inserts. That's a rice that comes from, has to do with the story that they're illustrating.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Actually hand put in. Oh, those are amazing.
And dropped in. And then there are, in this very magazine, I believe,
there are swatches. Don't know if we can find them, but anyway, they were just terrific.
Right.
There's fashion. So anyway, these are real treasures.
They're very much collected. Specifically, I talk about the Gentrys. Yeah. Gentrys have taken on a life of their own, not just as a collectible for Americans, but for Japanese.
Oh.
The Japanese male fashion industry cannot get enough of American gentries. Gentry magazine, this is a 1952 issue. From my being involved in different shows and being interconnected, I have had no end of requests for Gentry magazines, because the fashion that's showcased in this magazine is exactly what people are wearing today.
Yeah, well, nothing.
In 2003. Isn't it interesting?
Nothing ever changes and things come back. Anyway, now here we have, I guess, Bob Hope in Native American headdress. So this is like your entertainment, celebrity type, movie people type.
This is Gregory Peck, who just died last year. This is probably the most collectible issue from the late 40s.
I think I have that one. So that's a Life?
It's a Life magazine.
And again, that was just a compendium of everything you can think of. What's this one? Oh,
this
is a Post.
Saturday Evening Post. That is similar to Life, but different, with a slightly different approach.
They were more like stories and articles.
Stories and articles and advertising, especially during the World War II years. There was a lot of World War II advertising.
And of course, Post, what's his name?
Norman Rockwell,
Norman Rockwell
was one of the featured illustrators for Post, Saturday Evening Post for years and years. This particular issue is a Norman Rockwell covers issue. It's from the early 50s, and it showcases all the covers that he has done for Post, Saturday Evening Post. I mean, it's just,
you know, and actually Life rarely did illustrating. That was usually photography for the cover. And Post was usually illustrated.
So that's an interesting observation, because many of the photographers that have become American icons, like the gentleman who's, I believe is Eisenstadt, who photographed the sailor kissing the woman.
I know that woman, by the way.
At the Victory VE Day in New York, that very famous photograph. Photographers were a part of creating that whole legacy, that photographic legacy, that were part of Life. Life had another level of importance. It really gave the foundation for much of what is now considered classic American photography.
Oh, yeah.
Because these guys were hired or commissioned to
go out and shoot. And they had such a great eye.
Exactly.
Yeah. And just again, here's, this was a vehicle for ads. And we were talking before, in a way, television has taken the place of magazines, although there are a lot of magazines still.
Ton of magazines.
But I think probably people watch television more. And television, again, has all these categories: sports, fashion, children's. So nothing ever changes, folks. This is a great cover. That's Hitchcock with his birds.
Yep. That is a very collectible one because of the cover simply, but also the story inside is very interesting. Absolutely.
This is Photoplay.
Photoplay.
I didn't know they were that large.
Photoplay during the late 30s were that large. It's an oversized photoplay with Clark Gable, on it, and it is very, very collectible. They're very hard to find in any kind of decent condition. And, this was, of course, Clark Gable at his height.
It's true, movie magazines, because I liked Margaret O'Brien, and I finally found one, but they are in terrible condition. I think because they were looked at so much.
Exactly.
And they were probably cheaper paper than the Post and the Life. They were real pulpy paper. And, of course, nobody thought of them lasting for 60 years, so that was the problem.
Very true.
Let's see. Oh, here's a great one. Here is that Jean Harlow? Yeah.
That's the only issue that I know of Life magazine, at least, that Jean Harlow appeared on. It's a very collectible Life, and in very good condition.
It's in beautiful condition. Let me
and
just
as we're in Hollywood, one of the areas of collecting for magazines, specifically for Life magazine, is the celebrity covered
Let's just see
magazine.
an ad. Here's an ad like for Van Camp's Pork and Beans. There she is in her little 40s dress, 30s dress, excuse me. Yeah, that's great. All right, now we're going to go on to patriotic, because you may remember, if you watched the show open, that we had a fellow on named Peter Kreitler who did this little book, and he was born in July of 41. Someone gave him a magazine from July 41 that had a flag on it. And it said, "United We Stand." And a few years later, at a swap meet, he found a stack of July 41 magazines, and they all had a flag and "United We Stand." And he thought, well, this must mean something.
Absolutely.
Well, then he found out finally in one of the magazines, it said that it was a campaign after Pearl Harbor to, you know, kind of commemorate the United States. So anyway, I asked Bill to bring some, and Peter has these because he has over 300, and he had a show at the Smithsonian. But and you said these in general are very collectible.
Very collectible.
Do you think it's due to his book, or do you think it was even before?
Before the book, but specifically since the book has come out, it's very sought after. But I would like to say something about this particular topic. What has happened since 9/11, and specifically since we went to war with Afghanistan and Iraq, there has been a campaign to basically focus back or go back to the 40s, World War II, to give our current day effort a patriotic feeling based on the advertising style and the advertising mission of World War II. So what I'm seeing in the current day is that a lot of people love World War II magazines because they are on some kind of intrinsic level connected to the day because of what has been done in terms of...
Well, united we stand.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Oh, so here's, you have a life.
That is a very, very, very collectible life.
Gee, that is in great shape. I'm sorry, I said 41. It was July 42 because Pearl Harbor was December 7th, 41.
You got that.
Sorry, folks.
Right.
But anyway, here you go.
It's a wonderful issue.
Now, here's something I love, which are, and I picked them up, and I've gotten some from Bill, were World War II Life magazines.
Right.
And what's so interesting, if you look at the ones before the war, there's a total change after the war. The advertising has changed. You begin to see tanks and war material and soldiers in everything. We only have 5 minutes, by the way. This is so much fun. But anyway, I mean, it's just amazing that you have a total change. Let me just show this great ad. She's in a little nightgown. Yeah, that's just a great one. I've had a lady on who collects lingerie from the 30s and 40s, so she would love to have this. Okay, we're going to go on because we don't want to miss this subject. And here we have political.
Politicals.
All right.
Specifically political as it's relating to today's interests. We've just come out of the 40th anniversary commemoration of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and Castro magazines are of great interest again, because Castro, of course, and the Bay of Pigs is so associated with events leading to 11/22, unfortunately. But these are very, very desirable history things that I, even as a 7- and 8-year-old, thought were interesting to keep and collect.
And here is Post with the illustration.
Exactly.
As compared to Life, which is photographic.
And specifically this Life showcases the French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson.
Okay.
His photos have taken on a life of their own.
Well, that World War II photograph, I think, with the Frenchman crying when the Germans is so famous.
All of that.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Okay, now here's another. Now these are a very famous artist.
Roy Lichtenstein, who was commissioned by Time magazine to do a selective group of covers, and these are the most famous, Gun in America and Bobby Kennedy. The Bobby Kennedy is particularly special because it's a May 68. In fact, May 1468. Why is that significant? Because Bobby Kennedy was killed, what, June 8th? Right after the night of the primary.
Yeah.
So the results were coming in.
He was still alive at this point.
He was still alive, but this was his last cover issue, feature issue.
Gosh.
It's very symbolic and very, very historic, if nothing more.
And kind of sad.
And very sad. And the Gun in America is also an issue from '68. Take a look at this issue, if you can scan into that. Reason why I want to focus on that is look at the topic of this issue. The topic of this issue being the Gun in America. How far have we not come, if we can say? This is still a hot issue.
It always will be.
Exactly.
I think. And these are just great. Are these by R.C. Basheff?
They are by R.C. Basheff. They are two of his more famous covers. One of Himmler.
These are villains, of course.
Villains. Both of them are villains, yes.
And
but they're very, very, very interesting, very collectible. They certainly showcase the difference between Time and Life, again, using illustration.
Generally, although they used photographs as well.
But more so the important...
At that time.
The more important, I would say, covers and issues that people tend to collect tend to be illustrated.
Yeah.
Many of them by
Yeah.
Artsy Pasha.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, and let's just do a quick run. This is funny. It's a male magazine, and that was probably before Playboy. When was this?
It was in the 50s. There were a
Okay.
number of small, I'd say, knockoffs of male magazines that basically were
Kind of
fun to
pulp.
read.
Pulp.
Fun to read on the subway.
Pulp.
Dealt with
Yeah.
very much pulp.
That
Dealt with
brownish paper.
Yes, exactly.
This was interesting to me. Let's take a look at this one because I belong to the Orange Crate Collector Society. And of course, they would love to have something like that. I assume that has to do with the citrus
Absolutely.
industry. Here's something interesting that Bill does. You sometimes combine something that would have to do with the subject. Here's Queen Elizabeth with a first issue
First day
stamp.
covers.
So that's kind of a cross collectible.
Absolutely.
And of course, oh, that's an old fortune. That's from,
The second year Fortune was made.
1931.
The 1931 Fortune.
and that's kind of a businessman's financier.
It is a businessman's magazine that also, like the Life, the Time, used magazine advertising to reach their consumer market.
See what's on the back. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Camel cigarettes.
But inside there are all kinds of fun stuff.
We just have a minute.
Okay,
so.
sure, very good.
And interesting, these are German, having to do with design. And maybe we should just finish up on these two. Just an interesting juxtaposition. We've got Kennedy and the man who shot his brother, Lee Harvey Oswald. And that's, I've never seen that one with Oswald. I'm familiar with the picture, but I think that's great. Anyway, Bill, we didn't get to cover everything, but it was so interesting.
Thank you.
And I always enjoy seeing you at the shows. You're so full of knowledge.
Thank you very kindly,
And
Sally.
thank you for sharing with us today.
Absolutely.
And thank you all so much for watching. And I want to really stress, get those magazines. They really have a lot to do with your collectible. And again, it's just so much fun going through them. They'll probably bring back memories too. Anyway, happy hunting out there, and we'll see you all next time.